how about the ASEAN region as a whole? How do you see further relations that would be developed between Hungary and the ASEAN region?
We are very much interested in ASEAN. We have now a new dimension or emphasis of our foreign policy, which we normally call global opening. But there is a special element in this global opening which is turning to the east, turning to Asia. Now, when you come to Asia, of course, everybody speaks immediately about the giants and the huge geopolitical and economic shifts that have taken place recently in that region. So everybody has in mind China and India. Well, now, you know, Hungary we are not a big country. And we are aware of our opportunities and capabilities. I think for us, ASEAN countries are ideal partners. Plus, we have good traditions with most ASEAN nations, and also we have a large degree of complementarity for trade and economic relations in general. We may have some special know-how and expertise, like for instance water, what we were talking about. We can offer opportunities for education for students at all levels, especially universities. And that's why I believe that we have to develop very special relations with the ASEAN countries. ASEAN is, of course, an extremely interesting region.
So how do you see recent moves, by Myanmar to further open up its country to embrace?
That's another welcome development, which was very much praised and very much recognized. For instance, our last foreign ministerial meeting in Brunei, that was at that time the big subject. I mean, developments in Myanmar. Many of my colleagues, European colleagues, visited Myanmar, and now, as you know, different travels are taking place. Aung San Suu Kyi, she's just I think she's now in London. So all in all, that is again a very welcome development, because it strengthens the cohesion of ASEAN as a group, because we know ASEAN has a very diverse integration scheme in terms of size, in terms of economic level of development. Also, political ideologies may be somewhat different, but there is something which is of course common, and this is that each of these nations are fundamentally interested in a more developed integration schemes. And that's where I believe the European Union as such can also be helpful. We always say that, European Union need not be or must not be copied, because that's different. There are differences. But at the same time, there are perhaps techniques which can be useful also, for instance, for economic integration, for establishing a common and a single market, to establish a more efficient political cooperation, and so on and so on. So what I'm always saying is that ASEAN is the second most developed integration scheme in the world after the European Union. So that itself is a very important reason and basis for closer cooperation for the two integration schemes, and that's what we also tried to promote as much as we could at the time we had the presidency of the council, and that's what we are doing now as well.
But recent elections, across Europe show that the peoples have become more have doubts, over the benefits, of the integration. Do you think that this sentiment, will disappear later on, or whether the crisis, for how long the crisis will stay?
Well, this is an internal European issue here, which, by the way, shouldn't affect our external policies, be it foreign and security policy or indeed commercial policy. For instance, when we speak about commercial policy and when we speak about the crisis, we say, okay, we should develop the network of free trade agreements with the outside world, with so-called third countries, we call them, because it would be beneficial for growth and job creation within the European Union. So if we make a link between the external aspects and the internal, let's say, challenges that we are now having, in fact, the crisis is rather a factor of enhancing and intensifying relations with third countries than the other way around. So as far as the internal challenges are concerned, of course, we shouldn't forget European economy has been in crisis for a couple of years now, even if that crisis was not originated in Europe, as we know very well. Still, apparently, we are now suffering, and the whole world is very much interested in our recovery. And I think that with the latest developments, for instance in Greece, now we have to be more optimistic than we were even a couple of days ago. And all in all, I think that the Eurozone will have to be kept together, and at the same time our economies hopefully will start growing, hopefully in the second half of this year and especially next year. And that would certainly reduce the kind of Euroscepticism your question was referring to, which is no doubt there. Although, for instance, even if you ask the Greek people, who are immensely unhappy about everything that is happening in their country, and they also expressed it with their vote, especially the first elections.
And it turned out that they prefer to stay in the Eurozone.
I mean, the vast majority of Greeks, they say, no, we want to stay in. We also would like to stay in Eurozone, not just in European Union, but also in Eurozone, because they know very well that they would have very serious difficulties if they left Eurozone and they wanted to stay in European Union. Whether this is possible or not, of course, that's a theoretical question. But all in all, yes, there is Euroscepticism, but the main reason for that is the crisis. And if we, I mean, Europeans, look in the bottom of our heart, we all know that this has been probably the most successful exercise in the last 2,000 years of European history. What Europe has achieved, let's say, in about 50 or 60 or 70 years. And we all agree that this has to be preserved, and we are all working on solutions. Of course, maybe approaches are different, depending upon the different situations of the member states. But all in all, we have one common point, that this house must be preserved, and probably the house will have to be somewhat, let's say, modernized, but certainly it should not be demolished. And in fact, it has to be made somewhat stronger. It has to be renewed. Economically, maybe also institutionally. We are now in an ongoing debate on that, but the house will be there.
How about the European Union's relations with the ASEAN? I understand that has been attempts for negotiating for the free trade agreement.
Well,
maybe on the bilateral basis, maybe and after on the regional basis.
There are now ongoing free trade negotiations. Some of them are close to completion, like the one with Singapore. I understand that we are now conducting such negotiations with several other countries. With some other countries, the negotiations have not yet been started, but hopefully will start very soon. So the picture is fairly diverse for all the member states of ASEAN, but I think the ultimate purpose is quite clear. Free trade agreements will have to be negotiated and concluded by all the member states of ASEAN on a so-called bilateral basis. And all these free trade agreements will be so-called stepping stones or building blocks, whatever word you prefer, of an ultimate and final free trade agreement between the two regions. But we are not yet there. I was referring before to the large degree of diversity of ASEAN, and we realized, I mean, European Union realized very soon that the issues, challenges, opportunities are different in the case of different member states of ASEAN. So that's why we believe that now it's the bilateral approach we have to pursue, and once we have this network of building blocks, then of course we have to sit down and we have to come to a region-to-region free trade agreement, which will probably be the first of this type, a historic agreement it will be, I hope. And from our side, I mean, we Hungarians, we are fundamentally interested in such an agreement, because our trade is now developing very fast with most of the ASEAN countries. Our exports are now increasing at the fastest rate, if I compare it with other regions. So we are for free trade, of course, duly taking into account the interest of all parties.
It has been a wonderful interview. Thank you very much for your thoughts.
Thank you very much.